Today, Africa is home to some of the world's fastest growing tech ecosystems. It's where fintech is lifting millions into the formal economy. Digital health is bridging gaps in care, and classrooms are increasingly cloud connected. Yet, it's not just innovation on the ground. Africa is also asserting itself globally, shaping the future of tech diplomacy and leading the conversation on blockchain ethics and access. Despite all of this, challenges persist, as we heard there from Kaya, with a sizable infrastructure gap leading to low internet penetration, coupled with affordability challenges and a digital skills gap, all serving as hurdles to full realization of the continent's digital potential. So let's unpack it all. I'm joined now by someone who stands at the nexus of innovation, strategy, and impact, Lavina Ramkissoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. The reason I say I've been looking forward to this conversation, I find what you do to be quite fascinating. And so, let me start this interview very differently and ask you to explain what it is that you do. I looked at, your part of your resume. It talks to you playing a role in the African Union, AI and ethics, the ethics of AI. But you tell your own story. What do you do?
That's an awesome question. So for me, my work within the African Union really stems from, helping shape policies, and that's particularly tech policies and emerging technologies, which obviously include things like, artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum computing, and the rest. And that kind of really sets the pillar for how SMMEs, startups, whether it be fintech or otherwise, kind of really start accelerating their journey on the continent itself. And I think to kind of sum it up, I've been nicknamed the AI mom for a few years now on the continent. So that's been quite an interesting journey as well from advisory.
So part of what you do talks to AI ethics. And I suppose when you talk ethics and tech ethics, is it fair to say that the biggest ethical question within the African continent would be the question of access or lack of access for many Africans?
I think access is a huge point. Affordability is the next one that really comes very close to it. We know that by default, there's been many projects launched within the continent to address particular infrastructural issues. We know, for example, the African Free Trade Agreement came into place where they are, trying to really solve for all of, filling these gaps that exist. From a communication and satellite perspective, there's been obviously the launch this year of the African Space Agency to try and round some of that in. We know that the AFDB has really pinned down, backing a lot of the infrastructural upgrades that's required on the continent. But, in addition to that, I think the SMME startups, and tech innovators are really starting to play a larger hand in terms of bridging that end result that is actually required. Ethics for us kind of stems quite a large spectrum, right? So we would have heard one of the big techs a few years ago, came into the continent and, their employees were negatively impacted and affected because they weren't given the same rights as that of their international counterparts.
Yeah.
And, to that, we have another resurgence of that, again, the similar incident. It's thinking how can we actually prevent certain areas from actually accelerating this digital divide, or actually us just being taken advantage of. But yes, going back to the affordability and accessibility, it all literally starts there because, this digital transformation or this, onboarding of ourselves into this race really will not happen if those fundamentals aren't put into place.
I don't want to lose the opportunity to ask you about developments on the ground in as far as tech, digital access and its impact on the economy goes. So let me park my questions around some of the key questions on AI ethics for a moment and prioritize that. Just in terms of the impact of digital connectivity on the African continent, is it fair to describe it as a tech renaissance? Have we seen something of a tech renaissance on the African continent? And what are some of the factors that are hindering it from really taking root?
I think we stand at a pivotal point at this juncture, because tech isn't just tech anymore. It's become tech and politics at the same time. So, geopolitics is also adding quite a large pressure in terms of where we end up. When we talk about ethics itself, it is how do we ensure that we have ourselves protected, whether it be from a language perspective and, preserving the African language, to much larger, wider sort of range of issues, ensuring that whether you're a billionaire that's sitting on a plane, whether you're a go-go that is in a farm area, or whether you're a young youth that requires access, that you do have that, right? And communication is the benchmark of all of these services to then sit upon. So, if we don't get our infrastructural sort of network right, then we are not going to effectively leverage those services that then sit over and above that.
So for instance, Lavina, if I can talk specifics, we talk about digital health, and the idea, the way I understand it at least, is that these technologies, and currently in South Africa, we're talking about the possibilities of technologies like Starlink and connecting remote areas. These technologies are then said to be in a position to allow doctors, a doctor sitting at, I don't know, Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital in Johannesburg, to actually take part in sessions with colleagues sitting in Engutu in KwaZulu-Natal. Is that happening on any notable scale in the African countries that have benefited from some of these developments, some of the infrastructure that has been laid, the subsea cables, fiber laid? Are we seeing more and more of that? Classrooms that are linked to the cloud in terms of resources?
Yeah, yes and no. So I think it's been happening in incremental levels at this point in time. So, for example, we know that none of this is possible in isolation. So you require both policies as well as the accessibility or the unlocking of innovations like a Starlink to come on board to really give you the full picture of what is required. So we've had cases, across the continent, whether it be a big tech that has come in to play a part of us understanding our weather forecasts a little bit better and the impact that that actually has on healthcare. And as the climate actually changes, monitoring that in real time to understand what the impact is on any one of us, right, from a healthcare perspective. But I agree with you. At the end of the day, it needs to become a lot more tangible to the person on ground.
Yeah.
I think there was a stats that I read recently around, the connectivity issue, where it's only about 1 to 5% of the rural communities that are actually connected to the internet at this point in time, which is very it's worrying at this point in time. So how do we get the telcos to start playing a larger role in terms of ensuring that that last mile is actually fulfilled, for the greater good of us as a continent? So I think for us, we've got to move the narrative from a singular country to a much larger continental one voice, one vision, right? So to your point, at the end of the day, I think everyone wants that picture to see, hey, me as Lavina, I can have access to a healthcare system in the most rural part of the continent and know that I can get the best quality sort of access, as well. So there is a touch and a go at this point in time. We have, as I mentioned, geopolitics that are playing quite a large sort of pressure point to a lot of our politicians at the moment. And that really starts, taking us down a path that we've got to be very cautious on.
In fact,
to ensure that these things don't happen.
In fact, you lead me to my last question, which is perhaps it might be a bit of a political hot potato. Feel free to navigate it whichever way you see fit. I'm sure you will have noticed recently, Grok, the Elon Musk-backed, AI technology, and it's wading into those waters, those murky waters around the geopolitics, and suddenly, unprompted, You could be asking about what's the weather in Spain, and it would tell you about the white genocide in South Africa. That's one element, but then the current conversation being about whether or not to loosen South Africa's transformative policies to allow technologies such as these to come into the country. What ethical questions do these, and they're not, granted they're not in the same spectrum, but I mean they do raise ethical questions, and I imagine that you must have given it some thought.
Indeed, it's actually quite shocking that that actually happened and occurred. It really shouldn't have. A lot of these AI companies to date are really implementing what they call AI ethics officers, or people that would ensure that the use cases go through a very rigorous sort of process before they actually launch their LLM models. So it is very surprising that that kind of went through the loops. But then again, perhaps it's not as surprising given that it's Elon Musk's platform. But to the point of all of these indiscretions that's happening on ground, we have large amounts of misinformation, large amounts of disinformation that exist, and deepfakes as well, that really help to perpetuate these nuances that are there. So I think it really is a point where we've got to own our own narrative, and we've got to be super smart about it. We've got to be super fast about it. In terms of implementation as well as protection of ourselves, both within the South African environment, but also to the larger African narrative. Given the fact that there's been so many changes of leadership, just this year alone, all the way from the African Union, chairperson, to a few of the commissions, to now, AFDB, and, South Africa obviously hosting the G20. I think all of these things really push us down a path of having to take ourselves very seriously and putting a peg on the ground and saying, this is what we stand for.
All right, I've got to thank you for your insights this afternoon. That's Lavina Ramkissoon, who is a tech strategist and AI ethicist. What a fascinating subject that is going to be, AI ethics.